You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. Riddle Street wakes up. If you live with a man who treats time the way a miser treats gold, you learn two things fast. First, to keep your hands off his schedule. Second, to recognize the sound of trouble when it comes knocking. Trouble, that night, came as a telephone bell in the front hall and the dull, deliberate thump of Fritz Brenner's slippers crossing the tiles. It was just past 10. The house had already settled into its proper night posture. Wolfe, upstairs in the plant rooms, had finished his orchid inspection and descended like a satisfied emperor. The dining room had surrendered the last trace of coffee and cognac, and I had flopped in my office chair with a magazine that I wasn't reading. When Fritz called from the hall, "Archie, it is for you," I knew it wasn't a friend inviting me out for a late drink. Nobody with good intentions rings our bell after 10. I went out and took the receiver from Fritz, giving him a nod of thanks. "Archie, Goodwin speaking." A man's voice came through, thin and raw, the way a violin string sounds right before it snaps. "Goodwin, you don't know me, Listen, it's Riddle Street. Behind the lucky lantern there's—" He swallowed audibly, as if his throat had turned to sand. "There's a man in the alley. Face down, he's dead." I glanced at the grandfather clock, 10:06. "Who are you?" A quick, tight breath. "You don't need that. Just tell Wolfe. Tell him it's Mason Crow. Tell him the numbers man is finished. Tell him." Another swallow. Then, on a note of desperation that made my eyebrows go up, "Tell him to look for the page, the torn page." "Hold it," I snapped. But he was already gone. The line clicked, and I got my own voice back in my ear. I hung up and stood still for a count of 3, not because I was stunned. Death calls are not rare in our line, but because I was deciding what was least likely to get me yelled at. Nero Wolfe does not like interruptions. Nero Wolfe likes them even less when they come dressed as a riddle and dropped in the middle of his evening like a wet umbrella. But a body behind a place called the Lucky Lantern on a street called Riddle was not a coincidence. It was a neon sign, and Wolfe never could resist a sign if it promised him a puzzle. Besides, the caller had named the corpse Mason Crow, and that gave the thing a shape. I went back to the office and found Wolfe in his chair, huge and composed, with a book open on the desk, as if the thing were a servant standing by to entertain him. The lamp made his face look carved, heavy lids, heavy mouth, the expression of a man who has already formed an opinion about the universe and found it wanting. He didn't look up. "What was that?" "A telephone call," I said. His eyes lifted, slow. "That is usually the purpose of a telephone." A man reported a dead body behind the Lucky Lantern on Riddle Street. Face down, he named the victim, Mason Crow. "He told me to tell you to look for a torn page." Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction, which for him was animation. "Did he identify himself?" "Numbered. Did you ask?" "Yes," he declined. Wolfe's gaze dropped to his book, as if he could retreat into it and leave the city to solve its own troubles. He turned a page with thick fingers. "Inform the police." "I will," I said, "but I thought you might." He looked up again, and this time the gaze was direct and faintly accusatory. "You thought that I might abandon my chair at night and attend a puddle behind an establishment with a foolish name. You are wrong." That was Wolfe, the mind of a chess master and the stubbornness of a mule. I knew the next step. "All right, I'll call the police. Since the caller knew me by name and knew to mention you, I'm curious. I'll go have a look. I won't drag you out." Wolfe's mouth tightened. He didn't like curiosity in other people. It made him suspect the world might operate without his permission. "You will not go." I gave him my best innocent look, which has been polished by years of use. "I won't." That's a relief. I was worried I'd get my good suit wet. His eyes stayed on me for a long moment. Then, as if he had decided that resisting me would require more energy than he cared to spend, he waved a hand. "Go then, but do not involve me. Not a chance, I said cheerfully, and went to the phone. Inspector Kramer answered on the second ring with the voice of a man who had been interrupted at something important. Like eating, I gave him the location and the name and the detail about the torn page. He grunted, asked a question I didn't answer, and hung up on me in his usual affectionate manner. 20 minutes later I was on the streets, with my collar up and my hat low, and New York was doing what it does best at night, gleaming and growling at the same time. Riddle Street is one of those short, stubborn little streets that seem to exist only because the city forgot to pave over them. It's not a place where you take a date or a priest. The lucky lantern sat on the corner like a cigarette burn on a clean tablecloth, bright, cheap light spilling out, a strip of green neon that made every face look a little seasick. Rain had been coming down in a fine, persistent mist, enough to slick the pavement and make the reflections dance. Behind the bar there was an alley, narrow and sour, clogged with trash cans and the smell of stale beer. 2 patrolmen were there, and a knot of men in plain clothes, and the bright white glare of a flashlight cutting across wet bricks. Kramer spotted me immediately, as if my presence was a personal insult he had been expecting. His hat brim dripped. His big shoulders were hunched inside his coat. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I got the call," I said. "I thought you might want my spiritual support." He made a sound that could have meant anything from disgust to indigestion. "Stay out of the way." I stayed out of the way, meaning I didn't step on the corpse, but I looked. The body was face, down in a shallow puddle, half under the lip of a dumpster, as if it had crawled there for privacy. The rain had plastered the man's hair to his skull. His coat was decent, dark wool, no shine. His shoes were the first thing I noticed, polished, expensive, the kind that don't belong in alleys. They were clean enough that I could tell he hadn't walked far in that rain. A medical examiner's man with a bag and a sour expression was crouched beside the body. He rolled it carefully, and the face came up into the flashlight beam. Mason Crow, the caller had said. I didn't know him personally, but I knew the type. A man who made his living keeping other people's numbers straight and his own hands clean. Crow's face had that tight, neat look, smooth, shaven, narrow nose, lips pressed as if he'd spent years practicing silence. Now the lips were slightly open, and his eyes stared at nothing. There was a dark stain spreading at his chest, soaking into the fabric. The examiner prodded, muttered, and said, "One in the chest, close range." Kramer's jaw worked. Weapon, not on him. Whoever did it had the sense to take it. Kramer turned to a detective I didn't recognize, a thin man with a notebook. "Search the area. He's got something on him. He's got to." I edged closer to the wall, where rainwater ran in rivulets down the bricks. Something fluttered there, caught in a crack like a trapped moth, as if it had been dropped in a hurry and glued there by the wet. It was a piece of paper, torn, damp, and stuck fast, like it had been dropped and then pressed into place by the rain. Not a whole sheet. A torn section, ragged at one edge. The rain had soaked it, but the ink held. I squinted and made out lines and columns, and at the top, written in a careful hand, "Week ending," and a date that I couldn't fully see under the smear of water. Below that were names or initials, some in full, some in shorthand, and numbers beside them. A ledger page, torn loose, then lost in the scramble behind the dumpster until the rain pinned it to the wall. I didn't grab it. I'm not a complete idiot, but I memorized what I could. 2 names, 3 sets of numbers. One set that had been underlined so heavily it looked stabbed before I could step back. The thin detective noticed me looking and came over. "Hey," Kramer barked. "Leave him. He's Wolfe's man. What you got there, Goodwin?" "Something fluttering," I said. "Looks like paper." Kramer stepped in and his flashlight beam pinned it. He grunted. "Ledger, damn." He pulled on gloves and peeled it free. The paper clung to his fingers like wet skin. He held it under the light, and I watched his eyes scan it. His face changed slightly, just a tightening around the mouth. That was interesting. "Anything?" I asked. He glared at me. "Nothing for you." That was even more interesting. If it was nothing for me, it was something to him. A voice came from the mouth of the alley. "Inspector." A man stood there, half in the glow from the bar's neon, half in the dark. He was in his 40s, neatly dressed, and he looked like someone who had practiced worry in a mirror. He held a handkerchief, as if he expected to have to wipe his hands on it. "I'm the owner," he said. "Name's Len Sutter. This is my place." Kramer's eyes snapped to him. "You found him." Sutter's Adam's apple bobbed. "One of my boys came in from taking the trash out and started yelling. I told him to call the police." Kramer stepped closer. "And did you call Wolfe's office too?" Sutter blinked, and for a split second I saw something sharp behind the worry. "Wolfe? No. Why would I do that?" I filed it away. The anonymous caller knew about me and Wolfe. The bar owner claimed he didn't. That didn't prove anything, but it changed the smell of the conversation. Kramer pointed at the bar door. "We'll talk inside." Inside the Lucky Lantern, the air was warm and thick with smoke and cheap whiskey. The light was green like a fish tank. The place was not crowded, but the people who were there watched the police with the wary attention of cats watching a dog. Behind the bar was a woman with black hair pulled tight and eyes too bright. She was polishing a glass as if she intended to wear a hole through it. Her lipstick was the only thing in the room that looked like it was enjoying itself. Sutter introduced her quickly. "That's Joni Pyle. She tends bar." Kramer looked at her. "You see anything?" Joni's eyes flicked toward me and back. "I saw the cops." "I mean before that," Kramer snapped. She lifted a shoulder. "I saw men come in. I saw men go out." "That's what bars are for." Kramer's patience isn't a large thing. "Did you see Mason Crow?" Her mouth tightened. "I don't know that name." Kramer leaned in, face like this. He gestured vaguely, as if all dead men looked the same. Joni's gaze slid away for a second. "That was all. Maybe. Lots of faces." Kramer turned on Sutter again. "Crow come in here tonight?" Sutter licked his lips. He came by. Yes, had a drink. Alone." Sutter hesitated too long. "Yes," Joni snorted softly, and the snort said liar more clearly than words. I watched Wolfe's future suspects arrange themselves like chess pieces. Sutter, bar owner, sweating. Joni, bartender, sharp. The thin detective with the notebook, the anonymous caller. And Mason Crow, dead and face down, with a torn ledger page in the rain. Kramer's eyes went to me. "You got what you wanted. Goodwin, now go home." I left, because if you don't leave when Kramer tells you, he starts inventing reasons to arrest you for something that happened in 1898. The rain had thickened while we were inside. The street glistened under the neon. A couple of men stood under the Lucky Lantern's awning, pretending not to watch. One of them met my eyes, then looked away quickly. A nervous man, not Sutter, not Joni, someone smaller, skinnier, with a hat pulled low. I took 3 steps, then turned suddenly and walked back toward him. He stiffened. "You're going to catch pneumonia," I said pleasantly. His eyes darted. "I'm just waiting for a cab." "Sure," I said. "Did you call me?" His face went pale under the green light. For a moment he looked like he might bolt. Then he shook his head too fast. "Number funny," I said. "Because I got a call about Mason Crow before the police did. Whoever called knew my name." His mouth opened closed. "I don't know anything." "That's a shame," I said. "Because someone just got murdered behind your bar, and someone else is scared enough to dial a detective's number in the middle of the night." He swallowed. "You don't understand. That's my job," I told him. "To understand." He looked past me, toward the alley, toward the men in plain clothes. His hands were shaking. He leaned in a fraction, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "Crow wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to bring that page. He was trying to trade it like a fool." "Trade it with who?" The man's eyes widened, as if I'd asked him to sign his own death warrant. "I can't." "You can," I said. "You already called me. That means you're halfway committed." He shook his head, and his breath came quick. "They'll kill me." "Maybe," I said, "but if you keep quiet, You'll die for sure. Quiet people are easy to bury. That landed. He flinched. His sister, he whispered. A woman came in asking about him, said she was his sister. She was scared. She kept looking over her shoulder. Crow came in after, saw her, and they argued, quiet, but angry. Then he left through the back. She followed. He took a breath that rattled. Crow said something. I heard it because I was close. He said, you want the page, then bring me the man who underlined it. And she said, you don't get to choose terms anymore. Then they went out. I stared at him. You heard that, and you still let them walk into the alley. He looked at me like I had insulted his mother. I don't tell grown people where to walk. You do if you're trying to stay alive, I said. What's your name? He hesitated. Eddie Bream. All right, Eddie, I said. You've done the brave part. Now do the smart part. Go home. Lock your door. If anyone asks, you never saw me. He nodded jerkily and disappeared into the rain like a man running from his own shadow. I went back to the car and drove home, with the city streaming past in wet stripes. By the time I got to the brownstone, it was close to midnight. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of life that never stops when you live with Fritz and Wolfe. Wolfe was in the office, of course. He was still in his chair, as if he'd fused to it. The book was closed now. His eyes lifted when I came in, and he looked mildly annoyed to discover that I had returned alive. Well, he said. I hung my hat and coat. Mason Crow is dead behind the Lucky Lantern, shot in the chest. The police found a torn ledger page near the body. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. A ledger page? Yes, it was wet, but I saw some entries. One set of numbers was underlined. Wolfe's mouth moved in a way that might have been a smile if he'd ever practiced. Underlined, he murmured. A dramatic gesture. There's more, I said. A nervous little bird named Eddie Bream claims Crow argued with a woman he thought was Crow's sister. She followed him out the back. Crow said, you want the page, then bring me the man who underlined it. She said, you don't get to choose terms anymore. Then, bang, Wolfe's fingers steepled. His eyes were half-lidded, not sleepy now, but intent. Who called you? Not Eddie. At least he denied it convincingly. Wolfe's gaze fixed on me. You are telling me that an anonymous person telephoned this house, named a dead man, referred to a ledger page, and you went to a wet alley to collect phrases, and now you are in my office, dripping trouble on my carpet. Only a few drops, I said. Fritz will forgive me. He loves you too much to kill me. Wolfe ignored that. Mason Crow, he said slowly. A numbers man. Seems so. Wolfe leaned back. The chair creaked under him like a ship under a captain who has decided on a destination. Every murder leaves a riddle, he said, almost to himself. This one merely underlined it. I blinked. That's poetic for you. You've been reading verse. He glared at me, which restored the balance of nature. Do not be impertinent. If a ledger page is torn and displayed, it is either a clue or a threat, or both. Kramer doesn't think it's for me, I said. He guarded it like it was his pension. Wolfe's eyes narrowed again. Then it involves a name he recognizes, or a name he fears. I sat down because the chair was there, and because I could feel the case trying to climb into my lap. So what do we do? Wolfe's lips compressed. We do nothing, he declared. Until someone comes here with money and a proper request. That was Wolfe's rule, and it had a solid foundation. Without a client, you're just a busybody with an appetite for getting shot at. But I had the uncomfortable feeling that the city had already marked our brownstone as part of its riddle. An anonymous caller had used my name. Someone had decided that Nero Wolfe should be told. People don't do that for sport. As if the universe wanted to underline my thought, the doorbell rang. He looked at Wolfe. He looked at the doorbell as if it had insulted him personally. Fritz's footsteps sounded in the hall. Wolfe's voice was a low growl. If this is another corpse, Archie, I will hold you responsible. I'll tell the jury, I said, and waited. Fritz opened the office door a moment later. He stood aside, and a woman entered. She was not dressed for Riddle Street. Her coat was dark and good quality, the kind that makes you look composed even in bad weather. Her gloves were still on. Her hair was damp at the edges, and her face held that look of someone who has made a hard decision and is determined not to regret it. She stopped just inside the office and looked straight at Nero Wolfe, as if she had memorized his portrait. "My name is Lila Crow," she said. "Mason was my brother." Wolfe's eyes did not widen, but something in him tightened into focus. "I came," she went on, her voice steady with effort, "because Mason is dead, and because before he died he told me that if anything happened to him, I must come to you. He said you would understand the page." Wolfe's hands rested on his chair arms like the paws of a great cat. "Sit down, Miss Crow," he said, "and tell me everything. Begin at the beginning, and do not omit a fact because it frightens you." She sat. I stayed quiet for once, because the riddle had just walked through our front door. Chapter 2. The loudest shadow, if you want a good look at fear. Don't watch a man who admits he's afraid. Watch a woman who refuses to. Lila Crow sat in the red leather chair facing Wolfe's desk, her gloves still on, her posture stiff enough to keep her spine from shaking. Her face had the chalky steadiness of someone who had spent the last hour swallowing panic in small, disciplined bites. Fritz had brought coffee. She hadn't touched it. Wolfe had listened without moving, his eyes half-lidded. He does that when he wants the other person to keep talking, as if the silence will punish them if they stop. I leaned against the file cabinet with my hands in my pockets, doing my share of looking harmless, while my brain kept taking notes. Lila spoke plainly. "Mason handled money," she said. "Not bank money, cash, for people who don't sign receipts. He told me he was trying to get out." Wolfe's eyelids lifted a fraction. "From vice, Miss Crow, no one merely gets out. One is permitted to withdraw, or one is buried." Her mouth tightened. He knew that. He said he had something, a page proof, names and numbers. He said it could buy him safety. "Or by his death," Wolfe said. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to Wolfe. "Yes." Wolfe's voice was smooth. "How did he acquire this page?" "He wouldn't tell me," she said. "He said it was torn from a ledger that was kept by the man who truly ran the operation, not the collectors, not the runners, the man behind them." Mason said he had finally seen the real book. She drew a breath. "He said there was an entry underlined, as if someone wanted it noticed, as if someone wanted him to panic." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "And you went to the Lucky Lantern?" "Yes, he told me to meet him there. He said it was public enough to be safe." Her laugh was short and dry. "He was wrong," I said. "You spoke to him in the bar." She hesitated, then nodded. "I tried to make him leave with me. He refused. He said he had arranged a meeting. He said..." Her voice dipped. "He said, 'You want the page? Then bring me the man who underlined it.'" Wolfe's eyes held her. "To whom did he say that?" Her jaw tightened. "To the man who came in right after I did, a large man, loud, angry. He didn't look like a banker. In New York, a large, loud man who doesn't look like a banker includes about 12 million candidates. But it was a start." Wolfe said, "Describe him." "Tall, heavy in the shoulders. A hard face. He was sweating, but not from the rain." She swallowed. "He called Mason a thief. He said Mason owed him." "Did he identify himself?" "He said his name," she admitted. Cal Briggs." That name tickled a memory, not a personal acquaintance. Thank heaven. But a clipping I'd once read about a brawl that had sent a man through a plate glass window on 9th Avenue. The headline had called him Big Cal Briggs, as if his size was his profession. Wolfe glanced at me. "Mr. Goodwin." "Big Cal," I said. "A walking argument." Lila went on. "They argued. Mason tried to keep his voice down. Briggs didn't. He said, 'Crow owed me,' as if the whole bar was his witness." Her eyes went distant for a moment. Then the lights blinked, just for a second. When they came back, Mason had moved toward the rear. Briggs followed him. I followed them both. "And then," Wolfe prompted. Her hands tightened inside her gloves. I heard the shot. One shot. I froze. When I moved again, men were already in the alley. Shadows. I saw Mason on the ground. I saw a man bend over him, Then someone grabbed my arm and pulled me back inside. I couldn't see his face. Her voice wavered, then steadied again. After that I ran. I didn't go to the police. Mason told me not to. He told me to come to you. Wolfe sat back slightly. A prudent instruction. If your brother trafficked with criminals, he may have trafficked also with policemen. Lila flinched, but Wolfe didn't soften. He rarely does, because softening is the enemy of accuracy. He asked, "What do you want from me, Miss Crow?" She met his gaze. "I want to know who killed my brother, and I want to know what he was holding that made him think he could bargain." Wolfe's mouth compressed. "Money," he said, "and a full disclosure." Her eyes widened. You have, Wolfe interrupted. "A dead brother and the fear that you will be next. That is not a retainer." He lifted a hand before she could protest. "However, I will accept your case if you will agree to one condition. You will do exactly as I direct." She nodded quickly. "Yes." Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. "Archie, you will." The doorbell rang again. Fritz appeared in the doorway, with the calm of a man who could announce an earthquake, as if it were dessert. "Mr. Wolfe, a gentleman," he says. "His name is Cal Briggs." I stared at Fritz. Fritz looked back as if to say, "Such are the nights in this city." Wolfe did not move. He rarely does, but his eyes sharpened. "Send him in." Lila's face drained. Here, apparently," I said. "New York is efficient when it wants to be." Cal Briggs entered like a bad drumbeat. Heavy feet, heavy breath, heavy presence. He was big the way a refrigerator is big, broad, squared off, built to sit where you put it. His coat was open, his hat jammed back, his face wet with rain and something else. He had the kind of voice that doesn't speak, it assaults. He saw Lila and stopped short. His eyes narrowed. "So that's it, you run to Wolfe." Lila stood stiff. "I came because Mason is dead." "Yeah." Briggs barked. "And you know why he's dead? Because he stole from me." Wolfe's voice cut in, level and cold. "Sit down, Mr. Briggs." Briggs turned toward Wolfe as if noticing him for the first time. That was funny, because Wolfe is not easy to miss. "But a man like Briggs doesn't see what he can't hit," he snorted. "You're the fat detective. I heard about you." Wolfe's eyes were mild. "I have heard about you also, sit." Something in Wolfe's tone, a quiet command that didn't require muscles, made Briggs hesitate. Then he dropped into the chair opposite Lila's with a thump, as if testing the furniture's ability to survive him. I took my place by the desk, where I could see both faces and, if necessary, reach the drawer where I kept a certain gadget for emergencies. Wolfe said, "You came here of your own volition." Briggs leaned forward. "I came because I got a call. Somebody told me you were sticking your nose into Mason Crow. I want it clear right now. Crow owed me money. Big money." Wolfe nodded once. "How much?" Briggs' eyes flashed. "Enough," he skimmed. He lied. He thought he was smart. He wasn't. Wolfe's gaze stayed on him. "You argued with him tonight." Briggs spread his hands, palms up, as if he were offering the truth like a gift. "Damn right I did. In the Lucky Lantern, I told him he was going to pay me or I'd tear him apart." "Did you tear him apart?" Wolfe asked. Briggs stared. "What? Did you kill him?" Briggs' cheeks reddened. "No, you think I'd come here if I killed him." Wolfe's eyes were impassive. "Many killers are foolish." Briggs slammed a fist onto the arm of the chair. The chair groaned. "I didn't kill him, but I'm going to find the guy who did, because I want what Crow had." Lila's voice was thin. "You mean the page?" Briggs swung his head toward her, and his grin was ugly. "Yeah, sweetheart. The page, he had something that belonged to me or belonged to someone. He was waving it like it made him king." Wolfe's expression didn't change, but I could see the small movement of his fingers on the desk, an internal signal that his brain had tugged a thread. Wolfe said, "Who told you that I was sticking my nose into Mr. Crow?" Briggs hesitated. "A guy, a name," Wolfe said patiently. Briggs' jaw worked. Eddie Bream, the little punk who works at the Lucky Lantern. So Eddie had called someone. Maybe he'd been running down a list of people he thought might protect him, Or maybe he was being used as a relay, a frightened mouthpiece for someone smarter, Wolfe said. You claim Mr. Crow owed you for what? Briggs shifted. Busyness. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. Which business? Briggs' voice rose as if volume could cover details. I'm not here to answer a bunch of questions like I'm some punk you can push around. Crow stole. I confronted him. Then the lights blinked out and someone popped him. That's it. Wolfe's mouth tightened. You mentioned the lights. Briggs blinked. What? You mentioned that the lights blinked out, Wolfe said. That is a detail your mind has underlined. Why? Briggs scowled. Because it was weird. 1 second I'm yelling at him. Next second, the room goes dark. Next second he's moving toward the back, like he was expecting it. Wolfe glanced at me. Archie, make a note. The interruption of the lights is not incidental. It is an act. I was already writing. Got it. Briggs pointed at Wolfe, jabbing the air with a thick finger. Look, fat man. Wolfe's eyes turned icy. If you call me that again, Mr. Briggs, you will leave this house instantly and never enter it again. I will not be insulted in my own office. Briggs opened his mouth, then shut it. He looked briefly confused. The way an animal looks when it discovers a fence it can't charge through. Wolfe continued. Calm. You did not come here merely to announce your grievance. You came because you are frightened. Briggs barked a laugh. Me frightened? Yes, Wolfe said. Because you believe the same force that killed Mr. Crow may decide you are inconvenient. You shouted in a bar. You made yourself visible. You are, as Mr. Goodwin might say, the loudest shadow in the room. Briggs stared at him, and for the first time his bluster wavered. I don't scare. Wolfe's voice was almost gentle. Noise is sometimes a mask for nothing. That landed too. Briggs' eyes flicked away. Wolfe said, Tell me who you work for. Briggs' face hardened. I don't work for nobody. Wolfe's gaze held him. Then tell me who you fear. Silence. I could hear the wall clock ticking, a steady domestic sound that felt out of place with murder and ledger pages. Briggs' hands clenched. I don't fear. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Very well, then you may go. Mr. Goodwin will see you out. Briggs' head snapped up. That's it. You ain't gonna. You have refused to provide information, Wolfe said. You have offered only noise. I do not employ noise. Briggs stood abruptly, making the chair complain again. He glared at Lila. This ain't over, he growled. Then he turned toward me. Tell Wolfe. Tell him Crow owed me. Everybody knows it. The people in the lantern know it. Ask 'em. I smiled pleasantly. I'll add it to the file under things that might get us shot. He stalked out, leaving the room feeling slightly smaller. When the front door slammed, Wolfe looked at Lila. You see, he is a blunt instrument. He did not kill your brother. Lila blinked. How can you be sure? Wolfe's lips pursed. Because he would have stayed to threaten me. He would have attempted to dominate this room. He left in frustration. A killer who has succeeded rarely leaves in frustration. Also, his eyes narrowed. He did not ask about the page in the manner of a man who has already secured it. He is hunting, I said. And he heard about us from Eddie Bream. Wolfe nodded once. Mr. Bream is frightened. He is also indiscreet. We shall speak with him. Lila's voice was tight. What about the page? The police have it. Wolfe's mouth tightened. The police possess paper. They do not necessarily possess understanding. He looked at me. Archie, tomorrow morning you will go to Riddle Street. You will speak with the bar owner, the bartender, and Mr. Bream. You will also, his eyes glinted, arrange to see Inspector Kramer. I groaned. That's like arranging to see a rhinoceros in a temper. Wolfe ignored that. And you will discover, if you can, why the lights blinked. I scribbled it down. Find out who killed the lights. Find out who killed Crow. Wolfe's gaze dropped to his desk blotter, where he had written a single line in his firm hand, underlined entry. He looked up again, and his voice was quiet, almost contemplative. A murder in an alley is simple. A torn page is deliberate, and a darkness that arrives on cue is a device. I glanced at Lila. Her gloves were still on, but her fingers had loosened. She was listening now, not just bracing. Wolfe said, "Miss Crow, you will remain available. Mr. Goodwin will arrange accommodations if necessary." She nodded. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, heavy and certain. "This is not a crime of impulse. It is a crime of administration." I felt the little prickle at the back of my neck that always comes when Wolfe is right, and the city is going to prove it the hard way. Outside, the rain kept falling, polishing New York's streets until every light looked like a clue. And somewhere, in a pocket or a safe or a hand that was trying very hard not to shake, was the rest of the ledger. Chapter 3. The missing minute morning in Wolfe's house has rules, more rules than a courthouse. Breakfast at 8, orchids at 9. Interruptions never. Murder does not respect etiquette, so it has to be handled like a rude guest, firmly and at Wolfe's convenience. At 10:15 I was back on Riddle Street, with rain still hanging in the air like yesterday's cigarette smoke. The lucky lantern looked less romantic by daylight. Neon is honest only at night. Len Sutter was behind the bar, trying to look like a businessman instead of a man who owned a place where trouble bought drinks. Joni Pyle was there too, polishing the same glass with the same contempt for it. Sutter saw me and stiffened. "You again?" "Me again," I agreed. "Where's Eddie Bream?" Sutter's eyes slid away. "Not here," Joni snorted. "He's hiding, like a rabbit that just learned what hawks are." I leaned my elbows on the bar. "Joni, I like you. You make lying feel expensive. Tell me about last night, about the lights." Sutter cut in quickly. "It was a power flicker. Happens old wiring." "Sure," I said, "and I'm the Archbishop of Broadway." Joni's eyes narrowed. "It wasn't old wiring. It was a switch." Sutter spun on her. "Shut up." "That," I said pleasantly, "was useful." Joni set the glass down with a click. "There's a little breaker box in the back hall. Anyone who's worked here more than a week knows which switch kills the room for a second. You flip it down, you flip it back up. Looks like a flicker. Feels like bad luck." Sutter's face turned a careful shade of gray. "That's not." "It is," Joni said. "And I'll tell you something else, Archie." Crow knew it was coming. When the lights went out, he moved, not startled, just ready. That matched what Briggs had blared and what Lila had said. "A planned blink, not an accident," I said. "Who had access to the back hall?" Joni's mouth twisted. "Who didn't? Staff, delivery guys. The men who think they own the place when they walk in. Cal Briggs, for one." Sutter barked. "Briggs never went back there." Joni gave him a look that could have peeled paint. "Len, you don't see half of what happens in your own bar." I was about to push again when a patrolman came in and handed Sutter a card. "Detective said you're supposed to call." Sutter stared at it like it was poison. "The patrolman left," Sutter swallowed. "Police took the camera footage from the alley," he muttered. "There's a camera back there. For the trash, for insurance." "A camera," I said. "Now you mention it." Sutter's eyes darted to mine. "They'll see Briggs did it." "Maybe," Joni said, "if the camera can keep its eyes open." That perked me up. "What does that mean?" Joni's lips pressed together. "It means the camera skips. Sometimes it's old. It freezes for a minute, then catches up." Sutter snapped. "It doesn't." Joni cut him off. "It does. I've seen it. A delivery guy slipped once, busted a case of beer, and the tape jumped right over him falling, like the thing blinked. A camera that blinked at the right time. A bar light that blinked at the right time. New York was developing a theme. I left the lantern with Joni's information in my pocket and drove to see Inspector Kramer, which is not something a sane man does without a good reason. Kramer was in his office at headquarters, looking like paperwork had personally insulted him. He glared at me as I came in. "What do you want?" "A minute," I said. "Actually, I hear you're missing one." His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The alley camera," I said. "The lucky lantern has one." Kramer's mouth tightened. He grabbed a folder, slapped it on his desk, and opened it. "You've been talking to people. I'm a social creature." He shoved a photograph toward me. Grainy stills from the camera, a wet alley, the dumpster, shadows moving, then a blank smear, like the film had coughed. I pointed. Right there. He nodded, grudging. At 11:18, the time stamp runs 11:17, then it jumps to 11:19. That made my eyebrows climb. Convenient. Or busted, Kramer said. But he didn't sound convinced. He sounded irritated that a machine had been uncooperative in a way that helped someone. I said, Crow's watch. Kramer looked at me sharply. You heard about that. I hear things. It's a hobby. Kramer grunted. Watch on his wrist stopped at 11:17. Could have stopped when he fell. Could have been busted before. Who knows? Bar receipt says 11:19, I said. Kramer's eyes hardened. You got that too? I'm thorough. He leaned forward. And what are you going to do with it? Run back to Wolfe and let him make a speech? That's the plan, I admitted. Unless you've got a better use for 2 minutes. Kramer snorted. 2 minutes don't prove a thing. No, I said. But they hide one. He stared at me for a long moment, then shoved the folder back. Get out, and tell Wolfe to stop playing games. I left before he could find a reason to keep me back at the brownstone. Wolfe was at his desk with his notepad, as if the world existed to provide him items to list. He didn't ask how my morning was. Wolfe doesn't do mornings, I reported. Joni's claim about the breaker switch, Crow's readiness, and the alley camera's missing minute. Wolfe's eyes sharpened at the last. A camera that omits time, he murmured. Interesting. And not just a minute, I said. Crow's watch stopped at 11:17, but the bar receipt puts him there at 11:19. Wolfe's gaze held mine. 2 minutes, he said softly. 2 minutes wide, I agreed. Big enough to hide a person or a gun. Wolfe took his pencil and drew a small circle on his pad, then another, and connected them with a line. He stared at it as if it were a map. Somebody made it. Possibly, Wolfe said, or they anticipated it. In either case, Mr. Goodwin, the gap is the point. He looked up and his eyes were cold, with satisfaction, the kind he gets when a puzzle stops being messy and starts being shaped. Find me, he said. The person who had the opportunity to control the light, the camera, and the time. I let out a breath. Sure, I'll just ask New York to line them up. Wolfe ignored that. In that circle, he had made space for a murderer. Chapter 4. The dull man in the corner. If you want New York to remember a man, have him shout. If you want New York to forget him, have him sit still and pay cash. By late afternoon, I was back at the Lucky Lantern, because Wolfe had decided that the bar was less a tavern than a filing cabinet, full of drawers nobody wanted opened. The rain had quit, but Riddle Street still looked washed. Out, as if daylight had scrubbed it and found stains it couldn't remove. Inside, the lantern was pretending it was an ordinary place again. Music hummed from the jukebox. A couple of men nursed drinks with the weary patience of people waiting for tomorrow. Len Sutter watched me like I was a tax notice. Joni Pyle watched me like I was entertainment. You're making this a habit, Joni said. Habits keep you alive, I told her. Where's Eddie? Joni jerked her chin. Not dead yet, that's all I know. Sutter leaned in, voice tight. I told you everything. You told me what you wanted, I said. Now I want the rest. He glared. There is no rest. That was when I saw him. The man nobody saw. He was in the corner by the jukebox, not leaning, not slouching, not even pretending to enjoy the music. Just sitting with a beer in front of him like a prop. Grey coat, grey eyes, grey face. The kind of man you'd swear you'd seen before, and then discover you'd sworn wrong. He wasn't watching me. He wasn't watching anyone. He had perfected the art of being present without being involved. I nodded toward him. Who's that? Sutter's eyes flicked over and back fast. A customer. Name. Sutter's jaw tightened. I don't take names. Joni's mouth curled. That's Eli Finch. Sutter snapped his head at her. Joni, what? she said sweetly. You want me to lie for you, charge me extra. I went over to the corner and stopped beside the man's table. Up close, his dullness was almost impressive. He looked like a clerk who had been stamped out in a factory. Mr. Finch, I said. His eyes lifted with polite reluctance. Yes, Archie Goodwin. His expression didn't change. That was not natural. In this town, anyone with brains knows my name is usually attached to Nero Wolfe, and Nero Wolfe is attached to trouble. I'm drinking, Finch said. Good, I said. Then we can do business in comfort. You were here last night. He blinked once. I come here often. You saw Mason Crow. I don't know him. You saw Big Cal Briggs, I said. Nobody forgets Cal. Finch's mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost nothing. Yes, he is noticeable. And you were sitting right here, I said. By the jukebox, when the lights blinked. Finch's eyes held mine. Perhaps. You didn't move, I said. I don't like excitement. Then you picked the wrong bar, I told him. He took a sip of beer, slow. I didn't see anything, the police already asked. Did they ask twice? I said. His gaze didn't flinch, once was sufficient. That was the confidence of a man who expected not to be pressed. Either he was telling the truth, or he was used to being ignored. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Funny thing about last night, Finch. The alley camera skipped a minute. A whole minute missing, like a tongue biting back a name. His fingers tightened around the glass, just a fraction. Then loosened again. I kept going. Crow's watch stopped at 11:17. The bar receipt puts him here at 11:19, 2 minutes wide. Big enough to hide a person, or a truth. Finch set the glass down carefully. You like to talk. I get paid for it, I said. You get paid for something too. What is it? His eyes cooled. I didn't see anything. There it was again, calm, flat, unbothered. Not defiant like Briggs, not slippery like Sutter. Something else. A man who believed the right answer was to be dull. I straightened. All right, I said. Stay dull. I went back to the bar, and Joni raised an eyebrow. He give you anything? Only disappointment, I said, which he served neatly. Sutter exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath. Eli's harmless. Joni's laugh was small and mean. Len, you wouldn't recognize harmless if it poured you a drink. I left before I said something that would make me popular with the local crowd. At the brownstone, Wolfe was in his office with the day's mail stacked like a barricade. He listened while I reported Finch's answers, which were not answers at all. Wolfe's eyelids drooped. A man who insists he saw nothing, he murmured, often means only that he wishes nothing to be known. He was confident, I said. Like nobody would ask twice. Wolfe's mouth tightened. That confidence interests me, I added. Joni named him Eli Finch. Says he's a bookkeeper. Wolfe's eyes opened a little more. A bookkeeper, he repeated, as if tasting the word. And Mr. Crow was a numbers man. The city is full of men who count for other men. I started to make a crack about how Wolfe counts orchids, but I didn't because Wolfe had gone still. The real stillness, the kind that means his mind is moving fast. Archie, he said, did you observe Mr. Finch's hands? I observed he has too, I said, and they don't do much. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. You did not notice his thumb. I frowned, replaying the scene, Finch's fingers around the glass, the careful placing of it. And yes, now that Wolfe said it, there had been something on his right thumb, a smudge that didn't belong with beer foam. No, I admitted. What about it? Wolfe lifted a hand, rubbing his own thumb thoughtfully against his forefinger, as if feeling the texture. When Miss Crow was here, he said slowly, I noticed on the card she carried, her brother's card, a faint mark of ink, the kind left by a fountain pen of quality, fresh ink, expensive ink, not the ink of a cheap pen at a bar. I stared at him. And Finch had ink on his thumb. Yes, Wolfe said softly. Fresh. Dark. The the sort that stains a man who handles ledgers. I felt my shoulders tighten. So Finch's dullness is a mask. Perhaps, Wolfe said, or perhaps it is armor. But consider the riddle: who holds the ledger, holds the knife. He looked at me, and his eyes were suddenly hard. You will bring Mr. Finch here? Voluntarily, I asked. Wolfe's mouth compressed. Preferably, but if dull men refuse to move, Mr. Goodwin, they must be nudged. I got up, already picturing Big Cal shouting in my ear, Eddie Bream trembling in a hallway, and Eli Finch sitting like yesterday's news while the city bled around him. On Riddle Street, everyone remembered the loud man. Now Wolfe had decided to remember the quiet one. Chapter 5. The ledger that bleeds by noon. Lila Crow had delivered two things to the brownstone: a key to her brother's apartment and a cardboard box that looked too light to carry so much trouble. His books, she said when I set it on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe regarded the box as if it might leak. Books, he said. Mr. Crow was orderly then. He had to be, Lila replied. If he wasn't, he died sooner. Wolfe's eyes lifted to hers. He died at the proper time for someone else's convenience. That earned her a flinch, but she didn't retreat. I gave her credit for that. New York makes plenty of brave people. It just doesn't label them. Wolfe nodded at me. Open it. I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 ledgers, a stack of receipts, and a fat envelope of loose sheets, Crow's private accounting, written in a precise hand that made even crooked money look respectable. Wolfe touched nothing. He never does if he can get out of it. Bring me, he said, the torn page. I produced the photocopy Kramer had grudgingly allowed me to see that morning, and the small evidence photograph of the original stuck to wet brick. Wolfe had made me copy the entries as best I could from memory. He had also made me write down, in plain numbers, the time stamp jump on the alley camera and the bar receipt time. Wolfe likes his riddles measurable. He laid the photocopy beside Crow's ledgers and had Fritz bring him his magnifying glass and a pair of thin gloves. When Wolfe puts on gloves, you know the case has stepped up from street talk to chemistry. He bent over the paper, huge shoulders rounding, eyes intent. For a moment the only sound in the room was the faint tick of the wall, clock and Fritz moving quietly in the hall. Then Wolfe sniffed. I watched him. If you start licking evidence, I'm quitting. He ignored that, and sniffed again, more deeply, cigar smoke. Lila stiffened. Mason didn't smoke. I did not suggest he did, Wolfe said, still peering. This odor is older than last night. It is embedded. He lifted the photocopy, set it down, and reached into the box to open Crow's first ledger. He turned pages with maddening care, like a man handling rare stamps. Observe, Wolfe said to me, and nodded. I leaned in. The ledger paper had a faint texture, good quality stock, not the cheap stuff bars use for tabs. Wolfe tapped the edge of a page with his finger. The paper has been folded, handled, pressed. Here, at the binding. He pointed. Along the inner margin were tiny punctures, not random, evenly spaced. Stitch holes, I said. Precisely. Wolfe's eyes glinted. Now look at the torn page. The photocopy showed the holes too, faint but visible, matching distance, matching spacing. Lila's voice was tight. So it really came from his book. It came from a book prepared the same way, Wolfe corrected. Possibly his, possibly another made by the same hand, the same supplier, the same method. But yes, this is not casual stationery. When you spoke with Mr. Finch, you neglected to observe properly. You said he had ink on his thumb. I noticed it after you told me to, I admitted. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Inability to observe without prompting is a defect. You should not indulge. I'll add it to my list right under breathing, I said. Wolfe ignored that and returned to the torn page. He stared at a corner where the ink in the photograph looked slightly blurred. Here, he said, the underlined entry. I leaned in. Looks like it's smeared. It is not merely smear, Wolfe said softly. It is mixed. He stood, an event in itself, and moved to the side table where he kept a small kit for examination. He brought back a tiny strip of clear tape and, with the delicacy of a man choosing an orchid bud, lifted what little residue he could from the edge of the photocopy's inked area. Then stopped, annoyed. "A photograph," he muttered. "Inferior. We require the original." I said, "Kramer will love that." Wolfe sat again, expression firm. "He will comply." Before I could make my usual remark about Kramer complying with a hurricane, the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared and said, "Mr. Wolfe, the gentleman you wish to see, Mr. Eli Finch." I felt my eyebrows go up. Wolfe had wished it, so the universe had delivered it. Never mind the delivery method. I made a note to ask Fritz later which miracle supplier he used. Eli Finch came in and sat where Briggs had sat the night before, and the chair looked grateful for the reduced load. Finch wore the same grey coat, the same grey face, the same practiced invisibility. He had the look of a man who hoped, by being unmemorable, to escape consequence. Wolfe regarded him. "Mr. Finch, you are a bookkeeper." Finch nodded once. "Sometimes." "Do you know Mason Crow?" "I know of him. You were in the Lucky Lantern during his argument with Mr. Briggs." "I was." "You told the police. You saw nothing." "I didn't see anything," Finch said, voice flat, and he said it with the confidence of someone used to saying it once and having the world accept it. Wolfe's gaze dropped to Finch's hands. "Hold out your right hand." Finch's eyes flickered, just a breath of irritation. "Why, because," Wolfe said. "I asked you." Finch held out his hand. Wolfe leaned forward. "Your thumb," even from my angle I could see it now. A faint dark stain at the edge of the nail, as if ink had tried to claim him and failed to do the job completely. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Fresh ink, not bar ink, not pencil, the ink of printed forms or a ledger book." Finch swallowed. "I help with numbers sometimes." "Numbers do not stain thumbs," Wolfe said. "Ink does." Finch's grey eyes shifted to the side for the first time, not quite meeting mine. "That was as close as he came to panic," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin, invite Mr. Briggs." I stared. "He'll shout the paint off the walls." "Invite him," Wolfe repeated. I picked up the phone. Because when Wolfe is in that tone, arguments are expensive. Briggs arrived within 20 minutes, as if he had been waiting outside the city for a chance to explode. He stormed into the office, saw Finch, and barked a laugh. "Look at that, the wallpaper guy." Wolfe raised a hand. "Mr. Briggs, have you ever handled a ledger?" "Like storms." Briggs glared at me, then back at Wolfe. "Crow did the counting." Wolfe nodded, satisfied. He turned back to Finch. "And you?" Finch's voice was lower now. "I help." "Help whom?" Wolfe demanded. Finch hesitated. His dullness wavered, like paint cracking. "People." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "You will tell me the name of the man whose ledger this page came from." Finch's mouth tightened. He said, "I don't know what page you mean." Wolfe didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Finch, you are not dull. You are cautious. And you are cautious because you have held something that bleeds." Finch blinked, and in that blink I saw it. The instant his control slipped, Wolfe tapped the photograph of the torn page. "The ink here is not only ink, there is a faint metallic trace, blood diluted by rain." Whoever handled this page close to the gunshot had blood on his hands, or he had wet ink that blood could disturb. Briggs frowned. "What the hell is he talking about?" Wolfe's eyes never left Finch. "I am talking about printing ink," he said, "not pen ink. Printing ink often contains metallic compounds. It dries differently, it smears differently, and it smells—" Wolfe's nostrils flared slightly. "Of smoke and oil, the way a print shop smells when it has been working." Finch's grey eyes stared at Wolfe, as if Wolfe had reached into his pocket and pulled out his own name. Wolfe leaned back, heavy certainty settling in. "The page ran," he said quietly. "But it did not run far. It ran to whoever printed it." I felt the case shift, like a lock turning. a ledger page that matched Crow's books, stitch holes, cigar smoke, printing ink blood. Wolfe's gaze remained fixed on Finch, and for the first time, Finch looked less like wallpaper and more like a man standing too close to a fire. "Now," Wolfe said, "tell me where that ledger was printed, and who ordered it." Chapter 6. The Riddle of the Knife. "And if you want a case to behave, you have to keep it from learning bad habits." Ours had already picked up one. It kept changing its face whenever you thought you had it memorized. The first change came from the coroner. Kramer called it in the tone he uses when the universe has inconvenienced him personally. I happened to be in the office when the phone rang, and I happened to answer it, because if Wolfe answers, he charges the caller. "Goodwin," I said. Kramer's voice came through like gravel being shoved into a bucket. "Tell Wolfe the medical examiner's finished. We were wrong about the gun." I blinked. "Wrong how?" "You tell him," Kramer snapped. "And tell him to stop acting like he owns my evidence." Then he hung up. I stood there for a second, with the receiver in my hand, listening to the dead line, and then I went to Wolfe, who was seated at his desk with his notepad open, and his face arranged into that look that says I expected the world to be foolish, but not quite this foolish. "The coroner's report is in," I told him, "and it says we were wrong about the gun." Wolfe's eyelids lifted. "Indeed." "No bullet," I said. "No powder, no entry wound that behaves like a gunshot. The coroner says the wound was made by a thin blade. Clean, professional, more scalpel than switchblade." Wolfe's mouth tightened in satisfaction, which is one of his more irritating expressions. "So the shot that everyone heard was something else." I finished. A door slam, a bottle, a car backfiring, a firecracker, a man clapping his hands. New York can manufacture a gunshot sound without a gun. Wolfe's gaze stayed steady. "And New York can manufacture darkness without a power failure." I nodded, feeling the pieces slide. The blink of the lights, the missing minute on the alley camera. The careful shoes Eddie Bream had described. Careful as prayer. He'd whispered to me when I found him that morning, shaking in a hallway behind the bar as if the walls were listening. I said, "The coroner also says the blade was narrow enough to slip between ribs, in and out. Quick." "Who kills like a whisper?" Wolfe murmured. And for once he wasn't asking me. He was asking the air, as if it might confess. That afternoon, Wolfe decided he wanted fresh testimony. Not because he distrusted the old testimony. Wolfe distrusts everything equally, but because a changed wound changes every mouth that described it. He had me bring Joni Pyle to the brownstone. Joni arrived with the same tight lipstick and the same expression of contempt for the world's intelligence. Fritz showed her in, and she looked around our office as if she'd wandered into a museum exhibit labeled "Rich People Who Don't Walk." Wolfe was polite to her in his heavy, formal way. He can be charming when he chooses, the way a lion can be graceful. "Miss Pyle," Wolfe said, "you will sit. Mr. Goodwin tells me you are observant." Joni's eyes flicked to me. "He also told me he's honest." "Occasionally," I said. Wolfe ignored that. "Last night, you saw Mason Crow." "I saw a man," she said. "Dead men don't carry name tags." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear him speak?" Joni hesitated, and that hesitation was the first crack in her toughness. "Yeah," she admitted. "Not much. He didn't talk like Cal. He talked like he was saving every word." "Tell us," Wolfe said. She looked at the floor, then up again, meeting Wolfe's gaze with reluctant precision. "Right before he moved toward the back, right before the lights did that little blink. Crow leaned toward me, like he wanted to make sure I heard him. He said, 'Finch will fix it.'" My eyebrows went up. Wolfe's didn't, but I could feel his attention sharpen like a knife itself. "You are certain?" Wolfe asked. Joni's mouth tightened. "I don't forget things said like that." He didn't say it like a joke. He said it like a man tying a knot. "And then," Wolfe prompted. "Then the lights blinked," Joni said. "And he moved, like he was on a schedule." Wolfe's voice was quiet. "Did he appear frightened?" Joni snorted softly. "He looked tired." "That's worse than frightened. Frightened men still think they can win. Wolfe nodded, as if she had handed him a tool. Thank you, Miss Pyle. Joni stood, smoothing her coat. You find who did it. Wolfe's eyes stayed on her. I will find the person who arranged it. Joni's lips twisted. Same thing. Not always, Wolfe said. After Fritz showed her out, Wolfe sat in silence for a full minute, which in our house is an event you can put on the calendar. Then he said, Archie, bring Mr. Briggs. Bring him, Wolfe repeated, and there was no arguing with that tone. When Wolfe uses it, he's not asking for a person. He's asking for a reaction. Cal Briggs arrived within an hour because men like Briggs never stray far from places where they might be needed to roar. He barged into the office, saw me, and grunted. You again. Me again, I said. Sit before you wear a groove in the rug. He sat, scowling at Wolfe, as if Wolfe had personally designed chairs to insult him. Wolfe said, Mr. Briggs, the coroner's report shows that Mason Crowe was not shot. He was stabbed. Briggs blinked. Stabbed, bull stabbed. Wolfe repeated, calm. A thin blade. Clean professional. Briggs' eyes narrowed. What's that got to do with me? Wolfe's gaze was steady. It has to do with the weapon you carry. Briggs' mouth twisted. I carry what I carry. Show it, Wolfe said. Briggs hesitated, then reached into his pocket and slapped a knife onto Wolfe's desk, as if he were laying down evidence of his masculinity. The thing was a brick, thick handle, heavy blade, the kind of knife a man uses to feel dangerous while cutting string. Wolfe regarded it with disdain. This is not a professional instrument. It is a toy for intimidation. Briggs flushed. It's a knife. It is a bludgeon with a hinge, Wolfe said. It could not have made the wound described. The coroner's blade was thin, more scalpel than switchblade. Yours is a cleaver pretending to be clever. Briggs' jaw worked. So you're saying I didn't do it. I am saying your knife did not. Wolfe corrected. You may still have done it with another instrument, but your personality is also wrong. Briggs barked a laugh. My personality? Yes, Wolfe said. You do not kill like a whisper, you kill like a shout. That hit him, not because it was insulting. Briggs eats insults for breakfast, but because it was accurate in a way he couldn't argue with. Briggs leaned forward, voice lower than I'd heard it yet. Look, Wolfe, I didn't stab him. I wanted him breathing. Breathing men pay. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, and dead men do not. Right, Briggs said, and for the first time he looked more worried than angry. So somebody wanted him shut up. Wolfe nodded slowly. Indeed. Briggs' eyes flicked to me. What about Finch? Wolfe's gaze sharpened. What do you know about Finch, Mr. Briggs? Briggs hesitated, then shrugged with forced casualness. He's a numbers guy, quiet, works for people. For whom? Wolfe asked. Briggs' face hardened. You know how it is. You don't say names. Wolfe's voice went colder. In my office, names are the currency. Briggs stood abruptly, snatched his knife back, and shoved it into his pocket, as if it had suddenly become embarrassing. You want names? Go ask Finch. He's the one Crowe trusted. He started toward the door, Wolfe said without raising his voice. Mr. Briggs. Briggs paused. You have just confirmed something useful, Wolfe said. Briggs turned his head, suspicious. What? Wolfe's eyes were half-lidded. That you are frightened enough to mention Finch without being asked. Briggs' face flushed, and he went out, slamming the door hard enough to make the lampshade shiver. I exhaled. Well, that was almost pleasant. Wolfe did not smile. He reached into his desk drawer and produced a cigarette. I stared. Since when do you smoke? I do not, Wolfe said. He struck a match, lit the cigarette, held it for a moment, watching the tip glow, and then set it, untouched. Into the ashtray, the smoke curled upward like a question. Archie, the helpful assistant, wanted to say something about theatrical habits. But Wolfe's eyes were distant, and when Wolfe's eyes go distant, it means his mind is walking somewhere. You can't follow without good shoes. He spoke softly, as if to the smoke. Who kills like a whisper? I said. A man who doesn't want credit. A man who wants silence, Wolfe corrected. And silence requires administration. He looked up at me. Mr. Finch's dullness is camouflage. Miss Pyle has just supplied the key phrase. Finch will fix it. Crow believed Finch could arrange something, repair a problem, alter a record, smooth an exchange. Or arrange a murder, I said. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Finch may arrange. He may not execute. The blade was professional. The timing was professional. The missing minute was professional. I felt the old familiar chill. So we're not chasing a hothead. We're chasing a technician. Yes, Wolfe said, and technicians have employers. He tapped his notepad where he had written, in his neat hand, Finch will fix it. Then he circled it, slowly, heavily, like a man drawing a boundary around a threat. Archie, Wolfe said, you will locate Mr. Finch's place of work. You will discover who pays him, and you will do it today. I stood up. Sure, I'll go find the man who can fix numbers and break ribs with a whisper. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the thin ribbon of smoke rising from the cigarette he would not smoke. The ledger bleeds, he murmured, and the hand that keeps it clean is the hand that interests me. Chapter 7. The trap of the obvious. If you ever want to see how a city tells stories to itself, watch who it points at first. New York doesn't like complicated villains. It prefers them loud, large and already guilty looking. Big Cal Briggs fit the part the way a bull fits a china shop. So Wolfe, who understands public appetite the way Fritz understands sauces, decided to feed it. Just enough to make the real eater show himself. He hauled Cal in hard without leaving his chair, which is one of Wolfe's more irritating accomplishments. A telephone call, a few clipped instructions, and Cal Briggs arrived at the brownstone as if he'd been hooked by a chain and dragged. He came in furious. His face was red, his coat unbuttoned, his big hands flexing like they wanted to grab something and wring it. He saw me first and barked. What is this? You cops now? I smiled. We're worse. We ask questions. He stomped into the office and stopped dead when he saw Wolfe's expression. Wolfe's expression didn't change, which is its own kind of pressure. He gestured at the chair. Sit, Wolfe said. Cal sat. The chair accepted it with a resigned creak. Wolfe's voice was mild. Mr. Briggs, you are the obvious suspect. Cal's eyes narrowed. Obvious? Yes, Wolfe said. You shouted publicly at Mason Crow. You threatened him. You followed him toward the rear. The street expects you. The police expect you. Even the bartender expects you. Cal's mouth twisted. So you expect me too? No, Wolfe said. I am not the street. Cal leaned forward, and the chair complained again. Let me tell you something. I'm guilty of shouting. I'm guilty of wanting my money, but I didn't stab him. Wolfe regarded him. For once, Mr. Briggs, that rings true. Cal blinked. Thrown off. What? You are not subtle, Wolfe said. You are not quiet. You are not skilled. The coroner describes a thin blade and a clean wound. That is not your manner. Cal's eyes flashed. Damn right it ain't. I don't whisper. I don't sneak. If I wanted him dead, everybody would know it was me. Wolfe nodded slightly, as if Cal had recited a line Wolfe already had on paper. Then Wolfe reached into his desk drawer and produced a small evidence envelope. Kramer had surrendered it with the reluctance of a man giving away a tooth. Wolfe took out Mason Crow's wristwatch, cheap enough to be practical, good enough to look respectable, and set it on his desk blotter. He slid it across the surface toward Cal. The movement was slow, deliberate, and it made the watch seem like something alive being sent toward a predator. Cal stared at it. What's that? Mr. Crow's watch, Wolfe said. It stopped at 11:17. Cal shrugged. So, Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The bar receipt places him inside the Lucky Lantern at 11:19. The alley camera omits the minute between. 2 minutes are missing. Wolfe tapped the face of the watch once with a thick finger. Where did you put them? Cal stared, then barked a laugh that had no humor in it. You think I stole time? What am I? A magician? You are a convenient scapegoat, Wolfe said. Cal's laugh died. His jaw tightened. Scapegoat. Yes, Wolfe said. The loud goat, led by the nose, so the wolf may walk free. Cal's eyes shifted, and for the first time I saw something other than anger in them, suspicion. Not of Wolfe, of the world. He leaned back a little, voice lowering. You really think somebody's pinning it on me? I think someone is pleased that you are available, Wolfe said. You shout, you threaten, you fill the air, while others move quietly. Cal stared at the watch again, as if it might answer. Then he looked up, and his eyes went hard in a different way. Less like a brawler, more like a man admitting he's been used. Ask the guy nobody sees, he said. Wolfe's lids lifted. Which guy? Cal's mouth twisted. The grey one, Finch. He's always there like furniture. He hears everything, sees everything, and somehow nobody remembers him. Crow trusted him. Crow said he'd fix it. Cal's hands clenched, and when the lights blinked, you know who didn't jump, Finch. He sat there like he was waiting for a bell. Wolfe's expression stayed calm, but I knew that calm. It was the calm of a man who has just had a suspicion handed to him wrapped in confirmation. You have observed Mr. Finch closely, Wolfe said. Cal snorted. You don't survive my line of work without noticing who's invisible. Invisible guys are the dangerous ones. Wolfe's voice was quiet. And yet you did not mention him before. Cal's eyes flicked away. I don't like talking about him. Because you fear him, Wolfe said. Cal's face flushed, but he didn't deny it this time. He just said rougher, I don't fear. I respect. He ain't a tough guy. He's a connector. He makes things happen without touching them. Wolfe nodded once. A technician. Yeah. Cal said, that. Wolfe's gaze hardened. Then Mr. Finch is the key to your missing minutes. Cal gave a bitter little laugh. Missing minutes, missing money, missing bodies. He pushed himself up from the chair. You want to catch the real guy. Stop looking at me like I'm the whole story. Wolfe's voice was mild again. You may go, Mr. Briggs. Cal paused at the door and glanced back. You know what's funny? He said. Out there on Riddle Street, they already decided. They decided last night, Big Cal yelled. So Big Cal did it. That's how it works. Then he was gone, stomping out with enough noise to make the front hall vibrate. I exhaled. Well, he didn't stab Crow, but he sure stabbed the obvious. Wolfe reached out and drew the watch back toward him, his fingers careful. The trap of the obvious, he murmured. A story the street prefers because it requires no thought, I said. And while the loud goat gets blamed, the wolf walks free. Wolfe finished, his eyes narrowing, for the moment. Outside, through the window, the city looked calm. Cars moved. People hurried. Life continued, as if it hadn't been interrupted by a missing minute, and a man dead in an alley. But I could almost hear Riddle Street chuckling to itself, amused at how easily it could point and laugh, and how hard it was to make anyone look at the quiet corner where the truth sat. Chapter 8. The quiet man's footsteps. You can tell when Wolfe is doing something unnatural, by the way. The house reacts. Fritz moves a little faster, as if to cushion the shock. Theodore Horstman in the plant rooms becomes a distant thundercloud. Even the chairs in the office look offended, because they were built on the comforting assumption that Wolfe would occupy one of them and stay occupied. So when Wolfe announced, at precisely 10:45, Archie, we are going to Riddle Street, I stared at him long enough to be rude. You, I said. Going, yes, he said. At night, yes, to the Lucky Lantern. He blinked once. Your powers of comprehension are intact. I tried again. Is there a wager involved? Did Fritz promise you a new sauce recipe if you leave the house? Wolfe's heavy face remained composed. There is an experiment involved. An experiment requires observation. Fine, I said. But if you catch pneumonia, I'm not carrying you upstairs. You could not, Wolfe said serenely. Proceed. At 11:10 we were on Riddle Street in my car, parked with a view that gave us the lantern's entrance, the alley mouth, and a slick stretch of pavement that turned the neon into a trembling green snake. The rain had returned, not a storm, just a steady, thin drizzle that made everything shine and everything smell faintly of old bricks and damp paper. Wolfe sat beside me, vast in the passenger seat, his hat brim low. He didn't look at the bar, he looked at the reflections. "You know," I said. "Most men watch faces." "Most men are easily misled," Wolfe replied. "Reflections do not perform for you, they merely exist." That was Wolfe, turning philosophy into a weapon. We were there for a time, 11:17 Crow's watch time, the time the alley camera had admitted, the time the missing minute had swallowed. Wolfe had circled it so many times on his pad that the paper looked bruised. At 11:12, the lantern's door opened, and a couple came out laughing, huddled under one umbrella. Their laughter sounded too bright for Riddle Street, and it faded as they moved away, swallowed by wet traffic. At 11:14, a delivery man in a cap appeared at the alley mouth, tossed a bag into the trash with a grunt, and disappeared. The bag landed with a wet slap that made me think of Crow's body again. At 11:15, the street kid appeared. He was small, wiry, with a hood pulled up, and a face that had learned early not to invite conversation. I had met him that morning behind the lantern, when he'd been hanging around, pretending not to be hanging around. He'd sworn he heard Cal Briggs roar, and then, his words, "Shoes, careful as prayer." Now he leaned against a lamppost as if it belonged to him. Wolfe spoke without turning his head. "That boy is watching the alley. Maybe he's watching for a warm place to sleep," I said. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the wet pavement. "Perhaps, or perhaps he is being paid to watch." "By whom?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "We shall see." At 11:16, the lantern door opened again. Eli Finch came out of the rain like a man stepping out of a photograph. Same grey coat, same neutral face, same air of being a piece of furniture that had wandered off and returned to its proper corner. He paused under the awning, glanced down the street, and went inside. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Eli, you said he comes often," I murmured. "Yes," Wolfe said, "and yet he has arrived at precisely the time that interests us." We waited. At 11:17, the neon flickered, just a tremor, the kind you might blame on wiring if you were determined to stay stupid. The street kid's head lifted, Wolfe's fingers pressed lightly against the edge of his seat, as if he were holding himself down. The lantern's back door in the alley did not open. No one ran. No shout erupted. The minute passed like any other minute. Wolfe exhaled, faintly annoyed. "It is not theatrical," he said. "It is practical. Therefore it does not repeat itself merely to amuse me." "Sorry," I said. "Next time we'll bring an audience." Wolfe ignored that. "We will enter. In the bar." "Yes," Wolfe said. "I wish to see Mr. Finch's shoes." I turned and stared. "That is the most Wolfe sentence you've said all week." He gave me a look that suggested my opinion was not required for the operation of the universe. "Go." Inside the lucky lantern, the air was warmer but not kinder. The green neon washed every face and made everyone look slightly sick and slightly guilty. Len Sutter was behind the bar, doing his best impression of a man who had never seen police tape. Joni Pyle stood with her arms folded, watching the room with eyes that didn't miss much. Eli Finch sat where he always sat, by the jukebox, half in shadow, half in light, perfectly placed to be ignored. He held a beer, untouched. When Wolfe entered, the room changed. It always does. Wolfe's size and certainty alter the air, the way a heavy piece of furniture alters a room even before you set it down. Sutter's face tightened. Joni's lips twitched. Finch looked up, and then looked away quickly, as if eye contact was a contract. Wolfe did not go to the bar. He went directly toward Finch. I trailed him, ready to catch whatever fell. Wolfe stopped beside Finch's table. "Mr. Finch." Finch's grey eyes rose slowly. "Mr. Wolfe." That stopped me cold for a fraction. Finch hadn't been in our office long, and Wolfe had not introduced himself with any flourish. Yet Finch used the name as if he had known it for years. Wolfe's voice remained mild. May we sit? Finch's mouth moved. It's a free country. Wolfe sat, an event that made the table look suddenly smaller. I took the adjacent chair because if Wolfe was going to play field detective, I was going to be the field assistant. Wolfe looked down, not at Finch's face. At his feet, Finch wore plain black shoes, the kind you buy when you want a shoe that says nothing. But Wolfe's eyes were not interested in what the shoes said. He was interested in what they didn't say. He leaned forward slightly, and I followed his gaze. The soles were new. Not new in a shiny store, window way. New in a quiet, competent way. The edges were crisp, the stitching tight, and the leather had that faint matte finish that comes from being treated with care, not with polish. Wolfe's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. You have had them resoled, Wolfe said. Finch's expression didn't change. So, recently, Wolfe continued. Finch lifted his beer and took a sip, as if buying time with foam. I walk a lot, Wolfe's voice stayed calm. The soles are not merely new, they are soft, a composition designed to quiet sound. Across the room, Joni's gaze sharpened. She was listening whether she wanted to or not. Finch set the beer down carefully. You think my shoes killed somebody? No, Wolfe said. I think your shoes assisted someone. Finch's eyes cooled. That's ridiculous. Wolfe's heavy gaze rested on him. Mr. Finch, you sit in the same place at the same time in the same posture, and you cultivate the same unremarkable appearance. You are rehearsing invisibility. For the first time, Finch's dullness slipped. Just a fraction. His eyes flickered. Irritation, maybe fear, maybe both. I like routine, he said. So do I, Wolfe replied. But I do not pretend my routine is a disguise. Finch's fingers touched the edge of the table lightly. What do you want? Wolfe did not answer immediately. He turned his head slightly and looked toward the alley door, as if the wet bricks behind it could be coaxed into talking. Then he stood. Archie, he said. We will go to the rear. Sutter straightened behind the bar, alarm rising like gas. Hey, customers don't go back there. Wolfe's eyes cut to him. Then you should have locked the door. Sutter's mouth opened, then closed. Joni made a small sound that might have been a laugh. I followed Wolfe through the back hall. The breaker box was there, just as Joni had said. An innocent little metal door that could manufacture darkness for anyone with a finger and a plan. Wolfe stopped and looked at it, then looked at the handle. He did not touch it. He rarely touches anything in public, but he observed it the way he observes orchids, with ownership. At the back door, Wolfe paused. Rain tapped at the glass. I opened it, and the alley smell hit us. Beer, garbage, wet paper, and something faintly metallic that my mind didn't like. The trash cans were lined up like a jury. The dumpster loomed. The wet bricks glistened. Wolfe stepped out carefully, his shoes making a sound soft but not silent. He looked down at the puddles, at the reflections of neon wobbling in them. Then he moved toward the trash. Wolfe, I said under my breath, if you fall in something, I'm leaving you here as evidence. He grunted. Be quiet. He crouched, another event, and peered beside one of the cans. Rainwater had collected in a shallow depression. Something dark lay there, half stuck to the wet grit. Wolfe extracted a handkerchief and used it like a tool, lifting the object, without touching it directly. It was a scrap. Thin cloth. Like, but not cloth. A ribbon fragment. The kind used in printing machines, the kind that runs ink through a mechanism and stains anything careless enough to be near it. The edge was torn, recent, and along one side was a stain that wasn't ink, brownish, thin, irregular, as if something had bled and been wiped, and then wet by rain. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Printer ribbon. I stared. Out here. Yes, Wolfe said, and recently discarded. He held it under the weak alley light, turning it slightly. The stain caught the light with a faint, dull glint. Metallic, Wolfe murmured. Blood diluted, or blood mixed. My throat tightened. So someone came out here after and dumped it. Wolfe's voice was low. Or someone came out here before, carrying it as part of their apparatus. The missing minute, the manufactured darkness, the underlined entry printed, not written. I looked around the alley, suddenly aware of how many places a man could hide in the city's narrow spaces. But why dump the ribbon here? Why not somewhere safer? Wolfe's eyes flicked toward the bar door. Because the man who wishes to be unseen will always discard evidence where it will not be noticed. Garbage is a perfect hiding place. People avert their eyes. We went back inside. Finch was still at his table. Stillness rehearsed. Wolfe approached him again, and Finch's eyes lifted with that faint impatience of a man who thinks the world is being unreasonable. Wolfe did not show him the ribbon. Wolfe seldom shows his hand. He prefers to let you imagine it, he said, softly. A man who edits numbers can edit time. Finch's face remained grey, but something in his eyes changed. For a fraction of a second, they sharpened, alive, alert, calculating. Then the dullness returned, as if a curtain had dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about," Finch said. Wolfe nodded once, almost pleasantly. "Of course you do." He turned away, as if Finch were settled and finished, and walked toward the door. I followed, and as we left, I glanced back. Finch had not moved, but his hands, his careful, quiet hands, had tightened around his beer glass so hard that the knuckles showed pale through the grey light. Outside in the car, Wolfe sat heavily and stared out at the wet street again. "The scrap proves a print operation," I said. "It ties Finch to ink and equipment, and it ties someone," Wolfe corrected. "Do not leap, but it narrows." "To what?" I asked. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "To a place where ledgers are printed, to a man who understands paper, ink, and the value of a missing minute." I glanced at him, and Finch's shoes. Wolfe's eyes were steady. A man does not resole his shoes for fashion. He does it for function. Quiet souls are an investment. The street kid on the lamppost was gone now. Riddle Street had swallowed him. Wolfe looked at the reflections a moment longer, then spoke, almost to himself. "They arranged darkness," he said. "They arranged time, now they must arrange explanation." I started the engine. "Where to?" Wolfe's gaze stayed on the trembling neon in the puddles. "Home," he said. "And then, Mr. Goodwin, we will go to the printer." "The printer," I echoed. "Yes," Wolfe said. "The ledger bled. The ribbon proves it." The page ran, and it ran toward the press that birthed it. He leaned back, huge and composed, as if returning to his natural environment. And I drove us away from Riddle Street, leaving the lantern's green light behind, knowing, with the certainty that comes just before trouble gets personal, that the quiet man's footsteps were no longer quiet in Wolfe's mind. Chapter 9. The forgotten question, Wolfe's genius, is not that he asks brilliant questions. It's that he asks the question everyone else is too busy to remember. By the time Chapter 9 rolled around, the city had already written its preferred ending. Big Cal Briggs had shouted in public, threatened in public, and possessed the general look of a man who could murder a stranger out of pure enthusiasm. The police liked him for it. The bar liked him for it. Even the street kid had liked him for it. Because loud men make the world feel simple. Wolfe does not like simple. Wolfe likes accurate. That afternoon he sent Fritz away from the office, had me close the door, and had Lila Crow sit in the chair near the window where she could watch the street as if expecting it to lunge. Then he told me, "Bring Mr. Finch now." I did not ask how. I have learned that Wolfe's instructions come with invisible machinery attached. Ellie Finch arrived an hour later with the same grey coat and the same grey composure, escorted by my hand on his elbow and by the faint, unmistakable impression that he had agreed, because refusal would have been more troublesome than compliance. He sat where he always sat in our office, the chair across from Wolfe's desk, and he arranged his hands neatly, like a man laying out tools. "I don't see why I'm here," Finch said. Wolfe regarded him with calm disdain. "Because you matter, Mr. Finch." Finch's eyes did not change, but I caught the smallest tightening at the corners, an involuntary response to being seen. Wolfe said, "You were present at the Lucky Lantern when Mason Crow died." "I didn't see anything," Finch replied at once, smooth as practiced speech. Wolfe nodded. "Yes, you have said that to the police, to Mr. Goodwin, And to yourself, repetition is not proof. Finch's mouth flattened. It happens to be true. Wolfe did not argue. He reached into his desk drawer and removed the photocopy of the torn ledger page. He did not push it toward Finch. He simply laid it flat on the blotter where Finch could not avoid seeing it. Finch's eyes went to it, not dramatically, not for long. But they went to it the way a compass needle goes north before you can stop it. Wolfe saw it, of course. Wolfe sees everything that matters when he chooses to. You deny seeing anything, Wolfe said softly. Yet your eyes find this page as if it were calling you by name. Finch looked away. It's paper. It is more than paper, Wolfe said. It is administration. It is control. It is the difference between a man who shouts for money and a man who prints a ledger to prove he owns it. Finch's jaw tightened. Wolfe continued. You are a bookkeeper. You handle numbers. You handle ink. You handle men who do not wish their numbers handled by banks. Finch's voice was still flat. Lots of people do, indeed, Wolfe said. But not all of them have print a ribbon in their trash. Finch's eyes flicked up. What? Wolfe looked at me. Archie. I opened the envelope we had brought back from Riddle Street. Inside was the scrap Wolfe had lifted with his handkerchief, sealed and preserved like a small, filthy jewel. I set it on the desk. Wolfe picked it up and dropped it, lightly, onto the blotter beside the ledger page. The ribbon scrap lay there, black and torn with its faint brown stain at the edge. It looked harmless until you remembered what it meant. Wolfe's voice remained calm. Your thumb, your printer, your page, your missing minute. Finch stared at it. The dullness held for about 2 seconds too long. Then a thin crack appeared. It wasn't in his voice. Finch still spoke evenly. It was in his breathing, which became slightly shallower, and in the way his eyes stopped pretending not to care. I don't own a printer, he said. Wolfe's lips pursed. I did not say you owned it. I said you used it. Finch's hands tightened, then relaxed again. You're making things up. Wolfe leaned forward, heavy and deliberate. Let us be precise. The ledger page smells of cigar smoke and print oil. It has stitch holes matching Mr. Crow's book. The ink is printing ink, not pen ink. The alley camera skips exactly 1 minute at the moment of death. The bar lights blink on cue. Someone with quiet shoes moves in that darkness. Someone discards a ribbon, torn recently. Behind the bar, Finch stared at Wolfe. And for the first time his grey presence looked less like wallpaper and more like a man trapped behind it. Wolfe's voice sharpened slightly. Do you know how rare it is to control light, time, and record? That is not the work of a brawler. It is the work of a clerk with power. Finch's mouth opened, closed. Then he said, with sudden bitterness that startled me because it had color, Cal would have killed him sooner or later. Lila's head snapped up. Her eyes flashed. What? Finch's shoulders lifted in a small shrug, as if the fact excused everything. Crow was stealing from Briggs. Briggs was going to get him. That's how it goes. Wolfe's gaze went cold. That, he said, is not an alibi. That is a confession wearing a suit. Finch stiffened. I didn't confess to anything. You have, Wolfe said. You have confessed to knowledge and intent. You did not say, Cal threatened him. You said, Cal would have killed him. That implies you know Mr. Crow was going to die, and you know why. You also imply that his death was convenient, even inevitable. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Only a man involved speaks of murder as an administrative outcome. Finch's composure wavered again. You're twisting words. I'm clarifying them, Wolfe corrected. You have spent your life hiding behind dullness, Mr. Finch, but dullness is merely camouflage. It does not change the facts. Finch's eyes flashed, anger now sharp and sudden. You don't understand what Crow was doing. He thought a torn page made him untouchable. He thought he could trade it. Wolfe's head tilted slightly. Trade it with whom? Finch stopped. The air in the room tightened. Lila leaned forward. With you, she whispered, and it wasn't a question. Finch's jaw worked. His eyes slid to the ribbon scrap again, and for a moment He looked like a man watching the floor drop away. Wolfe's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Mr. Finch, this is the forgotten question. Who underlined the entry?" Finch swallowed. Wolfe continued. "Because the man who underlined it wanted it noticed. He wanted Mr. Crow to panic. He wanted Mr. Crow to carry it. He wanted the page to walk into the alley." Finch's voice came out thin. "I didn't underline anything." Wolfe nodded slowly. "Number you did not. You printed it." Finch's eyes widened, just a fraction, just enough. Wolfe's gaze held him. "And the man who ordered it, your employer, did not want Mr. Crow to trade anything. He wanted him silent." Finch's lips pressed tight, and in that tightness there was the shape of a name he didn't want to say. Wolfe leaned back, suddenly towering again in stillness. "You will tell me who pays you," he said. "Or I will arrange for Inspector Kramer to do it for you, with less courtesy." Finch stared at Wolfe for a long moment. Then his eyes dropped, not to the ribbon, not to the page, but to his own hands, hands that had stayed clean too long. "I didn't kill him," Finch said, voice low. "I didn't hold the knife." Wolfe's reply was immediate. "I did not ask if you held the knife. I asked who commanded the hand." The room went silent, except for the faint tick of the clock. Steady, honest, unteachable. And I could feel it, the case narrowing, the walls closing in, the story the street wanted beginning to crack, because Wolfe had finally done what everyone else forgot. He had treated Eli Finch like Eli mattered. Chapter 10. The killer behind the wallpaper in Wolfe's office. Endings don't arrive with sirens, they arrive with chairs. By 6 o'clock, the room was arranged the way Wolfe liked it when he intended to finish. The red leather chairs in their proper semicircle, the desk cleared except for a few selected objects, and the air carrying that particular quiet. That means Wolfe has already solved it, and is now merely waiting for the rest of us to catch up. The guests arrived because I invited them, and because Wolfe's invitations have weight. Inspector Kramer came first, suspicious and scowling. Len Sutter and Joni Pyle came next, uncomfortable in a room that smelled of polish and good tobacco instead of stale beer. Lila Crow sat near the window, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the desk as if it might produce her brother alive. Big Cal Briggs came last, loud even when he tried not to be, filling the doorway with muscle and grievance. And Eli Finch was there too, grey coat, grey eyes, grey presence, sitting where I put him, looking like he was still practicing invisibility. Wolfe waited until everyone was seated, then folded his hands over his stomach and regarded them with mild contempt, as if their existence had inconvenienced him. "I have asked you here," Wolfe began, "because I dislike unfinished matters, and because there has been an excess of noise." Cal grunted. "You calling me noise?" Wolfe glanced at him, among others. Kramer leaned forward. "All right, Wolfe, let's hear it. You dragged me over here. You'd better have something besides your usual parlor tricks." Wolfe's eyes were cool. "Reason is not a trick, Inspector. It is merely uncommon." He nodded toward me. "Archie, produce the objects." I placed them on the desk blotter one by one. Mason Crow's stopped watch, the photocopy of the torn ledger page, and, in a small envelope, the scrap of printer ribbon Wolfe had retrieved from the trash behind the lucky lantern. Sutter stared at the ribbon as if it were a snake. Joni's eyes narrowed. Sharp, Lila's lips parted slightly. Cal leaned forward, puzzled. Finch did not move. Wolfe spoke calmly. "The street has been eager to blame Mr. Briggs. He is convenient, loud, threatening, visible." Cal slammed a palm on his knee. "I'm guilty of shouting, not stabbing. For once," Wolfe said. "That is accurate." Cal blinked, thrown off balance by agreement. Wolfe continued. "Mr. Crow was believed to have been shot. That belief was useful, because a shot suggests panic, chaos, and distance. The coroner has corrected the record. Mr. Crow was killed by a thin blade, clean, precise, a professional wound, not the work of a man who carries." Wolfe's eyes flicked to Cal, a brick of a pocket knife for display. Cal's mouth opened closed. He settled back, scowling, but I saw relief hidden in the scowl. Wolfe tapped Crow's watch. This stopped at 11:17. He tapped the ledger copy. A bar receipt places Mr. Crow inside at 11:19, the alley camera. He lifted his brows faintly, omits the minute between. Someone manufactured a gap 2 minutes wide, big enough to hide a murderer. Kramer snorted. You can't arrest a gap. No, Wolfe agreed. But you can arrest the man who created it. Wolfe's gaze slid to Eli Finch and stayed there, pinning him without touching him. Mr. Finch, Wolfe said, is a bookkeeper. He sits by the jukebox. He is always present, and yet no one remembers him, because he has made forgettability his profession. Finch's voice was flat. I didn't see anything. Wolfe nodded. You have said that with admirable consistency, and yet your eyes, Wolfe's finger moved, slow. Always find this page. Finch's gaze flicked, involuntarily, to the ledger copy on the blotter. It was as quick as a blink, but Wolfe saw it, and so did I. Wolfe opened the envelope and dropped the printer ribbon scrap onto the desk. The little strip lay there like a black tongue stained at the edge. Your thumb, Wolfe said softly, had fresh ink, not bar ink printing ink. This page carries the scent of cigar smoke and print oil. It was printed, not written. And this ribbon, torn recently, was found behind the lucky lantern. Joni inhaled, sharply. Sutter's face went pale. Finch's dullness held, but it had a crack now, a hairline fracture, the kind that spreads if you tap it. Wolfe's voice remained calm, almost conversational. You had your shoes resoled, he said. Soft soles. Quiet. A small investment for a man who wishes to move, unheard in a wet alley. Cal's head snapped toward Finch. You. Finch swallowed, the first obvious sign of human function I'd seen from him. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Now we come to motive. Mr. Crow was skimming. He was not an artist. He was an accountant with a bad conscience. He tore a page from a ledger you maintained, believing it would buy him safety. Lila's voice came out thin. Eli. Finch's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Wolfe continued. Mr. Briggs provided a splendid distraction. He shouted, threatened, and made himself the story the street wanted. Someone encouraged that story. Someone planted the argument, timed the blink of the lights, and used the alley's convenient camera flaw, or induced it, to erase a minute. Kramer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You saying the camera skip was deliberate? Wolfe's lips pursed. A man who edits numbers can edit time. Silence settled. Even Cal, who normally couldn't sit still if his life depended on it, sat frozen. Wolfe's gaze stayed on Finch. The bartender heard Mr. Crow whisper, Finch will fix it. Mr. Crow believed you could correct the books, arrange the trade, and smooth the danger. Finch's voice, when it came, was low. I corrected books, he said. Wolfe's eyes did not soften. Yes. Finch's composure shed another layer. Crow was stealing, he was sloppy. He thought he could wave a page and make men like Briggs back off. He couldn't. He looked up, and the grey in his eyes sharpened into something hard. He was going to ruin everything. Lila's hands clenched. So you killed him? Finch flinched, just once, then steadied. I didn't want him dead, he said, and the lie sounded tired. I wanted him quiet. Wolfe's voice was gentle, deadly. Quiet is achieved by silence, Mr. Finch, not by murder. Finch's mouth tightened. He spoke again, and now the words came in pieces, like tearing paper. He wouldn't stop, he said. He'd trade the page. He said he wanted the man who underlined it. Finch's eyes darted, then returned. There was no man, not really. It was me. I underlined it to make him nervous, to make him come to heel, to make him bring it out where I could take it back. Kramer's face hardened. So you admit you handled the page? Finch swallowed. Yes. Wolfe's voice stayed calm, and when he did not come to heel, you silenced him. Finch's shoulders sagged a fraction, the first real surrender. I timed the blackout, he said. The switch is easy. 1 second dark is all you need. I counted on Briggs to follow him. I counted on Briggs to shout. He did what he always does. Finch's mouth twisted. He made it easy. Cal half rose, rage surging. You used me, you volunteered. Finch snapped, and the snap had more life in it than anything he'd shown before. You were always going to hurt him. I just made sure you looked like you did it. Wolfe's voice cut through it, quiet and absolute. Mr. Briggs was guilty, looking guilty, sounding guilty, everything except guilty of murder. Finch's eyes flicked to the ribbon scrap again, as if he could will it to vanish. I didn't mean for the ribbon to. He stopped, and the room tightened. Wolfe's eyes went colder. Thank you, that completes it. Kramer was already on his feet. He moved around the desk, one hand going to Finch's shoulder. Finch did not resist. Resistance would have required the kind of noise he had built his life avoiding. As Kramer snapped the cuffs on, Wolfe spoke, almost softly, to the room. The quiet do not always mean harmless, Wolfe said. Sometimes it means unheard. Lila's eyes glistened at last, but she did not cry. She looked at Finch as if seeing him for the first time, and hating herself for not seeing him sooner. Cal stood rigid, breathing hard, his face working through anger, humiliation, and a rough kind of relief. So I'm free, he muttered. You are free, Wolfe said. And you are warned. Loudness attracts wolves. Cal's mouth twitched, bitter. Yeah, I noticed. Kramer hauled Finch toward the door. Finch turned his head once, as if searching for a corner to disappear into. There was no corner large enough. When they were gone, the room exhaled. Even the furniture seemed to loosen. Outside, beyond the brownstone's windows, the city kept moving. Wet streets, neon signs, people hurrying past mysteries they didn't have time to solve. Riddle Street, somewhere downtown, could finally stop chuckling. The loud one had been the decoy. The dull one had been the blade. And Wolfe, back in his chair, where he belonged, looked at the empty space Finch had occupied and said, with quiet finality, it is always a mistake to assume that what you do not notice cannot hurt you.